Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof, the 11th of June 2025. I'm going to start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. And the personnel figures have ticked back up again, 1,120 losses for the Russians in the last 24 hours. 8 tanks, that's a little bit higher too. 15 troop-carrying AFVs likewise, so a bit of activity. Bit hotter maybe in a few places along the front line. The weather could be more conducive for attacks. We don't know every day how that is affecting things. I've not kept a handle on weather patterns, although it's broadly summertime, so it's going to be pretty much. You've got the greatest chance of it being the best weather for attacking. Hard ground, lack of wind, decent visibility, etc., etc. 34 artillery systems is about 1.5 times the daily average. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 124 vehicles and fuel tanks, that's fairly decent, and 2 pieces of special equipment. So some all right figures there for the Ukrainians. Worth noting that there has been another prisoner swap. This took place yesterday. We had young troops, 18 to 25-year-olds, released I think the day before, or exchanged. This time we had all those released having serious injuries and illnesses, amputations, shrapnel injuries, vision problems, infections, and chronic diseases. Some have been diagnosed with hepatitis and tuberculosis. That's according to Budanov, the intelligence chief. So yeah, Ukraine says some of the prisoners brought back home today are suffering from TB and hepatitis. All the soldiers have serious problems, as mentioned by Budanov there. So here are some of the images of the returning soldiers. And then finally, there seems to have been a swap of the refrigerated dead bodies from Russia. I presume Ukraine gave Russia some as well. It was an exchange, but there was some controversy over this because the Russians claimed that Ukrainians didn't come to pick them up. I think there was a bit of jiggery-pokery with some PR going on there. But Ukraine has repatriated the bodies of 1,212 fallen soldiers. The remains of the soldiers were returned from multiple frontline regions, including Kharkiv, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Sumy oblasts. So that has happened. And that'll be good news for the families getting some closure there. Now, in the Seversk area, this is quite a long video. I'll leave it playing, I guess, in the background. In the Seversk area, Ukrainian forces repelled a Russian assault and captured prisoners. So reports the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade. They say that Russian forces attacked using 19 motorcycles, and you can see here motorcycles getting hit by the drones there as they cut out just before they hit. 3 buggies and up to a platoon strength of infantry. The result is 3 were captured, 18 were killed in action, and 5 wounded in action. 13 motorcycles and 3 buggies were destroyed. It shows you how much they are attacking on these unarmored vehicles these days. There appears to be no major mechanized equipment there involved in that attack, just motorcycles and buggies and quite a few people. We have the destruction of a Malva here, 152 mils S2-43 self-propelled artillery system. This is in the Kursk region. Good news for the Ukrainians, bad news for Russians. This is their newest piece of equipment, probably just in general, 2023 to present. This is in service. It is a 152 millimeter, as mentioned, self-propelled gun. You can see it there, fairly big footprint for that, a big old barrel. We have a range of, it's going to depend what the munition that you use is going to be, but the general range is 24.5 kilometers, so that's fairly average, I guess. Not the greatest range, to be honest. I don't know how many of them they have. On June 2nd, 2024, so a year ago, there was the evidence of the first one deployed to Ukraine in the Kharkiv region. So, yeah, Oryx has reported that 2 have been destroyed. Actually, you can add another one to that. So, yeah, not sure how many are in service in and around Ukraine. Then we come on to this. This is extraordinary footage. Now, this is happening in a place called Mariino in the Kursk Oblast, which is the area where the Russians first received the Storm Shadow inside Russia. So it's already had some form. And here the claim is that Ukraine launched a precision airstrike on the location of the Russian troops here. A large number of enemy personnel and valuable military equipment has been destroyed, including REW complexes and other assets that they were trying to keep in the rear. It's quite an incredible bit of footage here. This building gets absolutely shellacked by, I think, 4 guided glide bombs that smash into it. GBU varieties. There's that one at the bottom might have been an explosion. Might be 3 bombs hit it with a secondary explosion. So it seems to come out the side here, as otherwise they hit the roof of. There's a one there, one over here. Then yeah, that's an explosion out the side. So it's probably 3 bomb explosions and a secondary explosion as well. But that building has been properly done over. And if that was a concentration of troops, equipment, and maybe even leadership, then that will be a sore loss for the Russians. Now, it's been reported that the Ukrainian forces have struck Russian troop concentrations in the rear near Melitopol, Berdyansk, and occupied Kherson region. The strikes appear to have been successful, as hospitals in the region are reportedly being filled with wounded Russian soldiers. And I just want the reason I'm showing you a number of things like I am, and we'll go on to see a few more, is that there is a claim that the Ukrainians are doing a pretty useful job of explicitly targeting logistics and areas behind the line. There were rumors, I talked about this in my last military aid update, that the Ukrainians have been using ballistic missiles of their own making to potentially do some of these strikes. That would be interesting. Here we have the claim, attack of the Russian rear in the occupation. Good news. The Russians confirmed that through the channels that the defense forces struck Melitopol, Berdyansk, and Pologovsko-Rozhivska agglomeration during the day. At the same time, the information is officially suppressed. At the same time, we are recording the daily filling of hospitals in Rozhivka, Berdyansk, Mangush, Nikolska, and both hospitals in Mariupol with seriously wounded Russians. All of them are from Polohovsky, so Polohoy sort of area, which doctors describe as hell. Therefore, the Russian offensive in Zaporizhia region has de facto begun, but thanks to us, the defense forces have not only no hint of success, but sometimes do not have time to bring the stormtroopers to the point of beginning, hence the COI about Dnipropetrovsk region. According to the plan, they were supposed to be events, but in fact, read above. Okay, so let's put this into a bit of context and also speculation. This is speculation for me. But there's long been this claim that the Russians are going to mount an offensive in, well, we've heard a number of different places, but one of the big ones has been Zaporizhia. And then we've been seeing claims of that Spiderweb 2.0, whatever happened there or didn't happen, but that's generally somewhere in this area. And the Southern District are claiming 100 pieces of equipment and a blown up train. Then we've seen satellite images of 2 areas of railway where there appears to have been destruction. Then we've seen claims like this, that there have been strikes deep into the Zaporizhian rear and Kherson as well, leading to Russian hospitals filling up with wounded. And this could well be ahead of the offensive, such that they are then making claims that they have got over into the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast as a kind of distraction away from this idea that their attacks in Zaporizhia are not amounting to much because they're getting hit before they get to the contact line, which is kind of what you hear here. Therefore, the Russian offensive in Zaporizhia region has de facto begun, but thanks to us, their defense forces have not only no hint of success, but sometimes do not have time to bring stormtroopers to the beginning, hence the COI about Dnipropetrovsk region. So that should give you some explanations as to what the claim is there. I'd say that's pretty interesting. We've got a destruction of Russian field ammunition depot here in a southern direction. So again, you know, probably in the Zaporizhia direction, the landscape looks very flat and arable farming. So probably is Zaporizhia sort of area. We've got a massive explosion of a field depot there. And that is going to fit into hitting of logistics to stop the attack. Rather than having to deal with the troops on the ground charging at you on motorcycles and buggies and in infantry fighting vehicles, hit them at troop accumulations like you see here, guided glide bombs, although that's a different place, but hit them in troop accumulations, hit logistics, railways, hit the equipment before it gets to you, use ballistic missiles if you've got them, bish bash bosh, then you have a much better chance of these Russian offensives failing in this case before they even begin. Another strike on logistics, although this is back up to Kursk again. This is Glushkovo for the umpteenth time, I think, and you can see that from the wood being used here, that the bridge over Zvanoye has been hit. I mean, that's at least the third time I know that it's been hit. So yeah, you can see that they've tried to fix the bridge using these logs. But of course, if you fully get rid of these struts there, all the framework of the bridge, then you're not going to be able to do that either. So yeah, it looks like this bridge is deteriorating more and more with each successive strike. But again, that is a case of taking out logistics so that it's difficult for the Russians to get their equipment. In this case, it will be to get it to the Sumy area so that the Russians can continue their offensive in Sumy. Okay, then what else do we have here is a video of 100 Russian drones being intercepted. These are interceptor drones, drone-on-drone activity, smaller FPV drones being used against larger medium-range reconnaissance or kamikaze drones, mainly reconnaissance. Looked like there was either a Shahid or a Gerber, I'm not sure. But yeah, lots of different drones there, 100 drones taken out in that footage. Then what else do we have? Oh yeah, there's another video that has been released by Ukraine's SBU about Operation Spiderweb, the 1.0 operation. You can go and watch that. It is at the moment, as far as I can work out, only in Ukrainian, but there is some new footage. They've also spliced in footage of if I can, I don't, yes I can, of stuff that's available on social media as well. So Russian dash cam recordings of the vehicles carrying the containers driving to their target position. Then you get all the usual sort of footage. It's interesting. This part's interesting because I don't know that I can make it any bigger at the moment. Operation Spiderweb here, you've got 5 air bases, but this one over here, which I presume is Ukrainka, no explosions, no drones, no explosions there recorded on the map. So as you can see there, nothing at this 5th one. I like the way they kind of joined it with the spiderweb graphics there to make it look like an actual spiderweb. So Operation Spiderweb, there you go. So anyway, new videos come out there. You can go and watch that at your leisure. Right, moving on to distant strikes. And last night, Kharkiv was a place that was mainly targeted. So previously, we've had a lot of focus on Kyiv time and again, and Odessa, and also Dubno and places further to the west. But last night, it was Kharkiv. 85 drones sent in, 49 taken out, so not that many. And that's probably because Kharkiv was the target. Kharkiv is very close to the border, and it gives the Ukrainians very little time to acquire the targets. They're in over Ukrainian airspace for a very limited amount of time, and it means that more drones are going to get through. I've said that time and time again with regard to Kramatorsk, Slovyansk, and these places along the front line. It's the same for places along the border. So Sumy, Kharkiv, Kramatorsk, Slovyansk, Konstantinivka, those sort of places, the Russians will have most success with their one-way attack drones. There's just not enough time to shoot them down. Whereas if you're going to Kyiv and then Lviv in the west, you're having to, these drones, Russian drones, are having to travel right across the entirety of Ukraine in order to reach their target, and that gives you 7 hours to shoot them down. And so the interception rates are much higher for those sort of attacks. So last night, if Kharkiv was targeted, you're going to get less of an interception rate, which is what it appears to be. 49 out of 85. That's almost approaching the halfway mark there. 0 out of 1 Iskander-M ballistic missile, so only 1 ballistic missile sent in, and that was not shot down. So, Kyiv Insider reports that there's a diminishing return for Putin's war machine as Ukraine shoots down almost 500 targets in one night. It's an interesting idea. I think about this quite a bit. So the claim here would be that Russia is sending in now up to 500 drones of a night on their heaviest nights, or 479 is their heaviest. And quite a lot of those drones actually got shot down. But even a night like last night, how many drones that get through were decoys? How many were actually hitting their target? The question is, how much money is Russia spending? How difficult is it for the Russians to put together the resources to throw these drones into Ukraine every night, and Ukraine is shooting huge amounts of them down, but then Ukraine is using up a lot of resources. So I think this is a very positive spin on the situation where there are diminishing. Are there diminishing? But it is an interesting question. Is there a diminishing return on the investment that Russia is making? Are they achieving more or less than they were a year and a half ago with their drone attacks? I don't know. Interesting question. In a massive drone attack on Kharkiv, Russia struck residential areas with 17 Shahed drones within just 10 minutes, killing 2 people and injuring 54. The Odessa region was targeted as well, with reports of fire and destruction there. So the images you are going to see will be predominantly residential areas getting struck. That doesn't mean it was only residential areas struck, but that's more likely for PR reasons what the Ukrainians will release. A reminder that while you're sleeping, this sort of thing will be happening in Ukraine, said Tim White this morning. It's 4:30 now in the morning, and this is Kharkiv. These rescuers are amazing people, myriad dangers from buildings collapsing to more aerial attacks, heroes. And he's absolutely right there. Odessa region, drones also were active. So you can go and see quite a lot of damage coming from Kharkiv, sadly enough. Worth mentioning that the previous attack on Kiev, Tim White says, I've already shown some of the destruction overnight from Odessa and Kiev. So this is from yesterday, so 2 nights ago. Ukraine Air Force spokesman Yuri Ignat says that Moscow attacked with shrapnel-filled mortars used to hit the greatest possible distances, and not only equipment, cars, but also people. In other words, they're using cluster munitions, and shrapnel flies out of these these warheads to do maximal damage in civilian areas to civilians. That's where they are at. Now, also worth noting, a couple of nights ago on the really heavy attack on Kiev, the record attack on Kiev, it was not the record overnight attack. It was 315 drones or something like that. But since most of them were aimed at Kiev, it was a record night for Kiev. Russia completely destroyed Kiev's sewing production facility here. The owners have spent 15 years getting it together and building it, and just yesterday they purchased a Japanese embroidery machine and a new press, and literally that day only ashes remain. This is a sort of effect that the Russians are having on Ukraine's economy, on the people, on the spirit of the Ukrainians. It must be heartbreaking for these people. Not only are they losing human beings, of course, as well, family members and members of society, but just the commercial and industrial infrastructure of Ukraine is being consistently damaged or destroyed. And it is heartbreaking for those that pour their life and soul into building up in this case, a really technologically adept sewing facility, and then it just gets wiped out in one fell swoop. Now, what did the Ukrainians do last night? The biggest success, it seems, came from, and we don't know how many drones the Ukrainians sent into Russia, but there was definitely some significant explosions taking place at a gunpowder factory in Tambov, one of the key suppliers of gunpowder for the enemy's artillery, grenade launchers and small arms. That was cooking off, I think, fairly successfully, as far as the Ukrainians would see. Explosions or fire, something burning off, gunpowder burning off there consistently. And there are loads of videos of this place in Tambov from all sorts of different angles, from neighboring, nearby neighborhoods, I should say. Another video there of explosions in the distance at the Tambov factory. So Ukrainian drones struck the Kotovsky gunpowder plant in Russia's Tambov region overnight, or in the early morning. The facility is part state-owned by Rostec and produces critical gunpowder for weapons and ammunition for the Russia's MOD. It's the only plant in Russia making certain nitrocellulose-based powders. That could well be a very significant hit for the Ukrainians, as even Mark Rutte was, and I'm not wholly convinced by Mark Rutte's claims about how much ammunition the Russians are able to produce. I think he is overselling their production and underselling Allied production. Nonetheless, it is still obviously an issue that the Russians are building, have scaled as much as possible, scaled up their production of artillery ammunition and mortar rounds and so on and so forth, guided glide bombs. So you really need to be thinking about taking out those production facilities, taking out the gunpowder plants, etc., and that's what it appears Ukraine is doing. So this is the fourth time since 2023 that Ukrainian drones have struck this gunpowder factory in Tambov. The attack caused massive explosions and forced production to halt. Tambov gunpowder factory produces over 200 types of military explosives and ammunition for Russian forces fighting in Ukraine. It'd be interesting to know what the long-term damage to that facility is, whether that fire sort of spread at all. According to Ukrainian sources, last night a deployment point of Russian forces in Mariino in Kursk region was targeted. So I wonder if I was wrong about the other strike with the guided glide bombs, whether that was definitely Mariino. Let's have a little think about this. Yeah, I take it back, that guided glide bomb strike might not well have been in Kursk or Mariino. It might have actually been in Zaporizhia, which would also be, throw another dot to be joined in those attacks on the infrastructure around Zaporizhia. But I don't know, it could be anywhere. There's lots of people showing this strike on that building with all of those guided glide bombs and whatnot, but no one says where it is. Now, there's a lot of talk about this strike, which is in Mariino, which was struck as a place struck by Storm Shadow missiles sent into Russia for the first time some time back. Now, according to Ukrainian sources, last night a deployment point of Russian forces in Mariino, Kursk region, was targeted. Prior information indicated a company-sized unit of the Russian airborne forces was reportedly stationed there. But you can see things cooking off in that image. That is not, I mean, yeah, you could have airborne forces there for sure, but there's definitely some kind of military equipment, I would have thought, or ammunition. Here it says, permanent deployment, but Kyiv Insider says what appears to be another anti-aircraft unit taken out in Russia's Kursk region. So there are different claims about that. Something was hit, temporary deployment base. But yeah, there's definitely cooking off there. And it'll be interesting to see what the battle damage assessment is of that, if anything does come out, any more information does come out. Last night, permanent deployment point of Russian forces in Mariino was attacked. According to the information we had before the strike, it was a permanent base of one of Russia's airborne forces of VDV units with up to a company-sized presence. We're expecting good news from the upcoming General Staff report there. So, okay, we'll see. Also worth noting that Engels is still on fire, the oil depot there, at least it was yesterday. Russian oil depot struck by Ukrainian drones days back now was still burning. That's on June the 7th. That is still, he then says just yesterday, the oil depot near Engels air base was struck. So actually it was struck on the 6th then, was struck by Ukraine last week, is still burning according to new imagery. So that's within the last 24 hours, it is still burning. There are different claims as to how many tanks have been destroyed or on fire and whatnot. And then we have, what else? Publishing pictures of Saki airfield, says Max25. Well, actually, Dnipro Osint. In the continuation of the topic of reinforced concrete shelters for Russian aircraft, which are actively being built at many airfields throughout Russia and in the occupied Crimea. So this is something that Ukraine is going to have to deal with. You can see that there are shelters being built for the airplanes on each apron. Normally you would just get a jet just sitting there on the tarmac, really, in those aprons, and now you have reinforced shelters built for them, which will stop them being damaged potentially by drones. But larger missiles are obviously going to still be a problem. But, you know, how often can you get a Storm Shadow to whack into one of these shelters when these are very long way away? So it could be that the Russians have done a good job in protecting their kit there, although these Orion MQ-9 style drones are out in the open there. They're not protected. Shelters in the picture can easily withstand a strike from a Ukrainian drone, but they definitely will not stop Western Storm Shadow or Taurus missiles. A total of 12 shelters were built on the airfield. In addition to aviation, at least 5 Russian or Orion drones are based at the airfield. So this is an airfield in Crimea that can be hit by Storm Shadow missiles, but it is, definitely a case that the Russians, a bit late in the day, have started to properly protect their aircraft. Okay, then we're going on to other bits and pieces, and a little bit of sort of geopolitics going on here. The military aid funding to Ukraine will be reduced in the future US defense budget, according to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. The administration has a completely different view of this conflict. We believe peaceful settlement through negotiation serves the interests of both sides of our nation. I'm going to do a separate video on what the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has said in a bizarre video that just appears to be repeating Russian talking points with regard to nuclear war. It looks like the American government, I mean, you can complain about Jake Sullivan being scared of nuclear war and therefore going down the anti-escalation management ladder. The entire American government is now doing that. So every single criticism you have for Jake Sullivan needs to be multiplied by about 10 for the Trump administration, because Tulsi Gabbard has done a whole video whinging about being scared stiff about nuclear fallout from, one would presume, a nuclear war with Russia. Pete Hegseth says we're not giving any aid to Ukraine anymore. We're going to cut aid to Ukraine. It's coming out of the military budget now because we believe diplomacy. In other words, we're worried about escalation. You've got the Trump administration has now cut all USAID overseas roles in a dramatic restructuring. So, they are getting rid of soft power across the board. Internationally, State Department is to take over the US foreign assistance programs, as staffers warn of a devastating impact there. Then you've got Russia shipping weapons to Africa. So just while the US steps away from Africa and gets rid of USAID funding, Russia is stepping in. Russia ships weapons to Africa, violating sanctions, according to Associated Press. The deliveries, which reportedly include armored vehicles, howitzers, and artillery, represents another sign of Russia's expanding military footprint in Africa. It's where the money is for them. Although they might have pulled out of Mali, they're probably pulling into somewhere else. And meanwhile, Donald Trump said 2 weeks, I'll give you an answer in 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks ago, today is 2 weeks later. What are you doing? I'll let you know in 2 weeks whether Putin is playing us. If so, we'll respond differently. Okay, 2 weeks is up. Will you respond differently, or will you continue appeasing appeasing Putin? It appears that you are doing everything you can to appease Putin. The US-Russia talks, though, so then now they're going to have talks with Russia, will happen in Moscow very soon, held in Moscow very soon. What is going on? What is going on? It's utterly unbelievable. So I can confirm the next round of negotiations between the delegations will take place very soon in Moscow, said Russian ambassador to the United States, Alexander Dazhiev. Russia is pulling the United States through. This should be embarrassing. It should be absolutely embarrassing for people who think that the US should be a strong player on the international stage. It's just complete capitulation. Spokesman for the US Department of State, Tammy Bruce, has commented that the United States want Ukraine to have surface-to-air missile protections and to be able to deal with incoming missiles. So that's good news. She added there was no disputing the bravery and commitment of the Ukrainian people. She added there was no disputing the bravery and commitment of the Ukrainian people. If that was ever in doubt or questionable, this war and how they defended their nation has dispelled any of that. They are astounding people, and they're remarkable, and they are committed to getting their country safe and this war to end. And so are we. I certainly would dispute that we are not letting Ukraine do something. The opposite has always been the case. Our goal is to make sure that this war comes to an end, and we continue to focus on that. That is not disputed. So it's interesting. Anton Gerashenko goes on to say, thank you for your voice in support of Ukraine and freedom. The United States has real power and capability for real actions that can stop Russia's war crimes. Real sanctions, continued military support to Ukraine mean even more than thousands of words ever will. They will save thousands of lives, which is Anton Gerashenko basically saying lovely words, but you need to back that up with military aid. You need to back that up with sanctions. And at the moment, it's not looking like that. By the way, Tammy Bruce had a really embarrassing answer to a very simple question. Are you advocating the two-state solution for Israel? And she basically, as spokesman for the Department of State, who are responsible for foreign policy, says, she fluffs it for ages and then says, well, you know what, President's building's only 15 minutes down there, you should go and ask him. Now, that's literally your job to tell us whether your government is advocating a two-state solution for Israel. And that you can't answer that means that either you don't know, there's complete confusion, or it's really embarrassing because you don't support that. And essentially you support Israel just, I don't know, doing whatever they're continuing to do. So, Tammy Bruce is a bit all over the place. But here it appears that she's kind of saying the right things, but there is an element of empty words there going on, especially when in the same breath, these are two different people. At the same time, Pete Hegseth says that US is to cut military aid to Ukraine, reduce funding allocated for military assistance to Ukraine in its upcoming defense budget. So, as I mentioned earlier, and all the while, you can go and listen to what Russians think and say. Here's a Russian that says that she is, well, let's get it on the full screen. I'll just... I'll read you just a little bit what she said, to just give you an insight into what people are saying, Russians are saying on a daily basis. Well, we could have bombed Kiev right away and made it Russians. Why? There would have been no war. Why would we destroy Kiev? He asked her. So there wouldn't be problems, she says. What problems did Kiev cause us? If we had bombed Kiev, a lot of people would have died there. Well, that's life, she says. How can you smile and say that Kiev must have been bombed? And she said, so because he said, so because you're tired of the war, you think the whole of Ukraine must be destroyed. She said, because I'm tired of the war. So because you're tired, you think the whole of Ukraine must be destroyed. She says, yes. And start with Kiev. Yes, she says. Why not Moscow, for example? Moscow mustn't be touched, she says. Why? You're tired of the war because Moscow's Russia. And who am I? Are you Russian? Yes, I'm Russian. Wouldn't it be easier, for example, to just kill one person, Putin, and the war would be over? No. Why? Well, because Putin is smart and prevented an attack on us. And who wanted to attack us? NASA. NASA? What is NASA? An alliance, a coalition? I don't remember. I mean, she's trying to think of NATO. But she's like, NASA alliance? That's something new. NASA wanted to attack us. Aliens wanted to attack us. My position is that Russia is wrong. Why? Etc. So you got this argument between, I presume, someone who's not advocating war against Ukraine, and that Russian woman who is just saying we should have bombed Kiev, we should have destroyed you, we need to destroy Ukraine, and if we destroyed Ukraine, then we should bomb Kiev. Quote: we should bomb Kiev because it's fun. So you're kind of like, really? Okay, well. How much do these people understand what the diplomats in Russia are wanting, their maximalist intentions? How much do they understand what the Russian people are wanting? And the reality is that neither of those two sides of the Russian coin want peace. Neither of them want anything other than the destruction of Ukraine and Ukraine to be part of Russia. And yet, in light of that, Pete Hegseth and the Secretary of State and Donald Trump are going down the, we'll wait for diplomacy to work. Diplomacy can work. Diplomacy. 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 week. And you get an appeasement approach to Russia, and you get the Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, to splurge about how she's afraid of nuclear war, and it looks like appeasement, anti-escalation management theory, or escalation management theory being employed by the Trump administration, who were previously so critical of people like Jake Sullivan, and they appear to be doing exactly that. And the end result is Ukraine gets thrown under the bus, and these guys just want to go and have lovely meetings with Russia in Moscow, where they can talk about the good times and doing lots of business together. It's an absolute disgrace. Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.